Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 231 of the podcast. And on this episode of the podcast, I am talking about the Indianapolis Colts' plan or lack thereof at the quarterback position. Earlier this week, it was announced that Colts starter Matt Ryan will be benched for the rest of the season. And let's start with this. When Andrew Luck retired in 2018, we all knew it was a major deal that a star quarterback was retiring after only 7 seasons in the NFL, and one could have guessed the Colts franchise trajectory was forever changed. But what has transpired in the years since with the team's quarterback position is beyond baffling. During the 2019 season, the Colts went with Jacoby Brissett, who has weirdly become a filler at the position. He's now starting for the Browns until Deshaun Watson returns. I like Brissett. I think he's a decent starter. I think he was the perfect guy to choose after Andrew Luck because you were waiting for the franchise quarterback. But in the years since, they have not gotten a franchise quarterback. Then in 2020, they bring in a 38-year-old Phillip Rivers who may be a future Hall of Famer, and they go 11-5, but they lose in the postseason. I wasn't a fan of them bringing in Phillip Rivers. They weren't a Phillip Rivers away from winning a Super Bowl. I'm confused as what they were trying to accomplish with Rivers at quarterback. They weren't a team on the cusp of winning. They were in a rebuild, and that's something that annoys me about the Colts, is their unwillingness to admit that they've been part of a rebuild since Andrew Luck left the organization. Last year annoyed me the most when they brought in a former MVP candidate in Carson Wentz. They bring in Wentz, who is supposed to be Frank Reich's guy, and Carson Wentz had a good regular season. He threw 29 touchdowns last season, and then lost the final game of the season to the Jacksonville Jaguars that would have sent the Colts to the postseason, and they immediately put all of the blame on Carson Wentz the same way that the fans were doing and people online. It's like, alright, it's fine to put all of the blame on Carson Wentz, but whoever you replace him with better be a lot better. And then this offseason, they bring in Matt Ryan, a man who has been to the Super Bowl and won an NFL MVP. And the team gets off to a rough start and immediately benches Matt Ryan of all people. That's what's wrong with the Indianapolis Colts, is that Matt Ryan is your quarterback. My personal belief is this organization, the Colts, thinks way too highly of itself. It feels as though they are still caught up in the good old days of having Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. The team has never allowed itself to rebuild, especially at the quarterback position. Their last 4 quarterbacks have been veterans from other teams. They need to draft a young quarterback who they believe in to develop. Quarterbacks have their best runs with their original teams. Look at what's happening with Russell Wilson. He was a great quarterback in Seattle. He won the Super Bowl. He brought them to the postseason almost every season, and now he's with his second team in the Denver Broncos, and he's having a hard time adjusting. If you want to defend the Colts, you can say Phillip Rivers was an older quarterback and Matt Ryan was an older quarterback. Where they really failed was the Carson Wentz situation. I mean, that was the guy that Frank Reich and the organization was supposed to be able to revive. And the minute they failed at that, maybe they should have changed their plans. I don't think they were patient enough with Carson Wentz, and they immediately made him the scapegoat of last season's failure to make the postseason. That's not fair. That's not how you treat the quarterback position, the most important position in all of football. Think about it. This is the second straight year that the organization is putting the blame of the team's lack of success on the team's quarterback with Matt Ryan. And if you listen to the players on that team, they are shocked by this benching. They are clearly not blaming Matt Ryan the same way the coach or the team is. Ryan may lead the NFL in interceptions, but he is far from the biggest problem on the Indianapolis Colts. It is possible the Colts now playing a 6th-round draft pick at quarterback Sam Ehlinger is them realizing they need to rebuild, and if they continue to lose, draft a 1st-round quarterback. You just can't keep recycling quarterbacks. It just doesn't lead to success. The Colts are far from the only team with this issue. You also have Washington, Carolina. It's not just that these teams are bad. It's that they have no direction because they don't have what people view as a long-term answer at quarterback. That's the advantage that the other great teams have over teams like the Colts. Each and every week and each and every year, they know that they have the answer. The Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. The Bills have Josh Allen. The Packers have Aaron Rodgers. They don't need to worry about who's going to be under center. They know that guy is going to be elite, and they can build a team around them. The moment I heard that they were going to bench Matt Ryan is when I realized they should have just kept Carson Wentz. What was the big deal? Why did you have to get rid of him immediately? And I think the reason is because they wanted to prove that he was the problem with their team, and I think they believed he was the problem with their team. Clearly, he's not the problem with that team. They had other issues. They're not as good as a football team as they believe they are. They are not a quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl. They are a quarterback away from being a consistent NFL franchise, and then they can build towards the Super Bowl. I don't believe the quarterback should ever be the thing that puts you over the top as a Super Bowl contender. I don't think that ever works out. Remember when we all believed the Minnesota Vikings were a quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl, and then they brought in Kirk Cousins? I think you start with the quarterback and you build from there. Now the Vikings are playing really well, but they didn't when they first got Kirk Cousins. They weren't just a quarterback away. Very few teams have ever really been a quarterback away. I mean, we've seen that when Denver, when they brought in Peyton Manning. Yes, that team went to the next level, but they brought in an all-time quarterback, and the Rams were a quarterback away. They brought in Matthew Stafford. They replaced Jared Goff, and they were rewarded by it by winning the Super Bowl. They were legitimately a quarterback away. I think a lot of these teams that believe that they're a quarterback away really aren't there yet. And I think a lot of them are misguided by this idea that they're a quarterback away. I mean, look at the Niners. They were dying to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, and now it seems like they finally realize they can only really win with him. Who knows what Trey Lance will ever be in the NFL? We do know this. Jimmy G brought the Niners to both a Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game. What bugs me most about the Colts is, what did they think was the best case scenario for having Matt Ryan as their quarterback? What was going to happen? I mean, were you going to win a playoff game? Maybe. Not likely. Were you going to go to the title game? Were you going to go to the Super Bowl? Like, this is always how this was going to play out. I don't know why they couldn't realize that. He was an older quarterback. When was the last time Matt Ryan was thought of as one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL? It has been years and years now. How did they all think this was going to play out? Why did they think Frank Reich was going to be able to get the absolute best out of an aging Matt Ryan? I thought it was silly how many people thought Matt Ryan was an upgrade over Carson Wentz. I don't think Carson Wentz is a great quarterback. I think he makes crucial mistakes in the biggest moments, but he's still better than an aging Matt Ryan and an aging Phillip Rivers. The Colts should have kept Carson Wentz for one more season and see if they could have helped turn him around, because he's a lot better than the alternative, clearly. Give him credit or don't, Wentz brought the team within a game of making the postseason. That's not likely to occur this year. My solution for the Colts is draft a quarterback in the first round who you believe in and then build around him. That's what leads to success. I mean, look at the Bills with Josh Allen. They picked the right guy. They went through the growing pains, and now they're being rewarded by having one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. The Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. They drafted Mahomes and then they built around him. That's what a team needs to do. You don't build your team and then trade for a quarterback. I don't think that leads to success, and it clearly doesn't when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts. And what's funny is this team should know that more than any. I mean, look at the young quarterbacks they've had success with. Peyton Manning fell to their lap. Andrew Luck. These are some of the most talented quarterbacks I've ever seen. You won a Super Bowl and went to another with Peyton Manning. Andrew Luck was coming into his own. He was going to be one of those guys that was going to be one of the most dominant quarterbacks in the NFL. And then something bad happened. He retired due to injuries. That's bad, but you needed to recover from that and draft the next guy. I'll be honest, I was naive in believing that Andrew Luck's retirement would not be permanent. At this point, there's 0% chance of him walking through the door before. The Colts for over 2 decades had the answer at quarterback with Manning and then Luck. They have been looking for the short-term fix instead of looking for a long-term solution. And I give them absolutely zero credit for them realizing that in the middle of the season. They never should have gone after Matt Ryan in the first place. They should have drafted a young quarterback in the draft. And they probably should have traded up for a quarterback because no quarterback already on an NFL team is going to be the answer for this franchise. I don't see Lamar Jackson leaving the Ravens and signing with the Colts. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think any of the star quarterbacks are going to become available anytime soon. I've been watching football for a while now, and I've never seen a team routinely blame their quarterback for not having success. I mean, how many years in a row are we going to do this? Oh, Jacoby Brissett's not good enough. We need to bring in Phillip Rivers. Oh, Phillip Rivers, we really don't want him to come back. Let's bring in Carson Wentz to be our long-term franchise quarterback. Oh, Carson Wentz isn't very good either. He's the reason we didn't make the playoffs. Let's go to Matt Ryan. Oh, now Matt Ryan's no good. I mean, when is it ever going to be the head coach isn't very good or the GM of the team isn't very good? When are we going to start blaming other people for the failures of the Colts other than the quarterback? Frank Reich was categorized as a quarterback whisperer. He won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles as offensive coordinator. We all thought that he was going to be able to revive the career of Carson Wentz because Carson Wentz had great success with Frank Reich in Philadelphia. At one point, I bought into Frank Reich as an NFL head coach. Now I think of him as someone who can't win in the NFL without a star quarterback. He's not the type of guy who you can bring in an average quarterback and have success with. Kyle Shanahan has had success with an average quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo. He's brought him to the Super Bowl and he's brought him to the NFC title game. Frank Reich is clearly not capable of doing that, or he would have by now. He would have done it with Phillip Rivers. He would have done it with Matt Ryan, or he would have done it with Carson Wentz. He's not that good of an NFL head coach, and it's time to start blaming him for what's going on with the Indianapolis Colts. In today's NFL, now more than ever, teams realize when they don't have the guy at quarterback, when they don't have that franchise guy who can lead them to Super Bowls, and that's what makes these teams move on from quarterbacks faster than ever. But at the same time, they don't come up with a game plan to get a franchise quarterback. They're not giving anyone a real chance to prove themselves. I don't think Carson Wentz is a top 5 quarterback, but I think he's better than what the Colts are doing at the position right now, and I think he would give them a better chance of being a playoff team than any Matt Ryan or 6th-round draft pick could ever give them. Teams are allowed to move on from their starting quarterbacks, but it should be with a long-term answer. It shouldn't be with, oh, this didn't work with Phillip Rivers, now let's go to Carson Wentz. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If you don't believe Carson Wentz is going to be your quarterback for years to come, then he shouldn't be the person you bring in. I feel the same way about the Carolina Panthers. So Cam Newton moves on, and you immediately bring in Teddy Bridgewater, the most average of average quarterbacks, and then he doesn't work out, and now you're going to Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, some retread quarterbacks that you know aren't going to work out. That I can't forgive. I think that's forgivable. I will give teams credit for moving on from a quarterback they can't win with and trying to fix the problem. This is the Colts not even trying to fix the problem. This is the Panthers not even trying to fix the problem. The problem isn't they don't have a quarterback who can win a game. The problem is they don't have a quarterback who they believe in enough to be their quarterback for the next 3 to 5 years. They didn't believe in Matt Ryan enough to play him at least half the season. That's all I'm asking. You don't even believe in him enough to go a whole year with Matt Ryan. What was the plan here? Was it just let's get a name to make it look like we're trying to improve the quarterback position? I'll say this again. The quarterback should never be the final ingredient to a good team. It should be the first one. I mean, look again what's happening with the Broncos. They add Russell Wilson and they think he's going to make a really bad team a really good team. That's not what happens. You have to build around the quarterback. It's not going to happen automatically. Now, Russell Wilson is going to be given time to fix the problem because he was given given a massive contract, but it most likely is not going to fix itself this year. But in the next few years, I'm sure the Broncos will make the right moves to build a team around Russell Wilson. These last few years, the Colts have basically said, we've built a good enough team for you to win with, and we're going to bench you at the quarterback spot if it doesn't result with winning. They have not given their quarterbacks any wiggle room or job security. They have not properly built around the quarterbacks they've acquired. Let me reiterate something. I'm not saying that the Colts should not have moved on from Carson Wentz. If they really believed he was the problem, that's fine. You can move on from him. What I'm saying is it should have been with a better quarterback than Matt Ryan, who is at the end of his career. You should have a long-term plan if you're going to move on from someone like Carson Wentz. The Eagles did move on from Carson Wentz. Guess who they had at the quarterback position? They had Jalen Hurts, who is now, at this moment, undefeated because the team has built a really good team around their young quarterback. They know for the next few seasons at least that they are going to have Jalen Hurts and that he is the right guy for that organization. It's not just about picking who the quarterback is, it's picking somebody who you're going to stick with. The Dolphins, for the longest time, for example, switched quarterbacks every year, it seemed like. After Dan Marino, they never found the answer. Then they picked Tua Tagovailoa and they've given him time to grow and develop, and we're going to see if that's going to pay out. Right now it looks really good because the Dolphins picked a guy. That's something that the Colts need to do. They need to pick someone, just any young quarterback who you believe in, and give him a chance to be the quarterback for your franchise. My issue with the Colts is they have not given their last four quarterbacks a chance to actually be the franchise quarterback. I don't think they gave Carson Wentz a chance. I don't think they gave Jacoby Brissett a chance. Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers, that's a different story. They were older quarterbacks who they never should have brought in the first place because the Colts acted like they were a quarterback away from winning. And I always laugh at that when I hear people say that about a team. Like I said, the Vikings were only a quarterback away from winning. We're going to bring in Kirk Cousins. That didn't work out because you're never a quarterback away from winning. The quarterback is everything. If you pick the right quarterback and you develop him, that is your team. I know it's corny to say, but it's the most important position in all the football, and if you don't have that position filled with somebody who you believe in long term, then you're really lost as an organization and you're not as good as where you think you are. And I think that's the problem with the Colts. They have never fully looked in the mirror at themselves since Andrew Luck retired. Again, that's a tough place to be in. This is a guy who we all thought was the best quarterback prospect in decades. This is a guy who we all thought was going to wound up being a future Hall of Famer, and he leaves the sport due to injuries. But this is 4 years now. It should have really only been 2. They already should have picked a guy, and they probably should have stuck with Carson Wentz at least one more season because at least for a moment they believed in him and they thought he was the guy. The Colts have to realize there are very few perfect quarterbacks out there. There are very few guys who are going to throw 40 touchdowns a season and lead you to the postseason. There are like 5 great quarterbacks out there, and then the rest of them you just have to live with, and it seems like the Colts are just not willing to live with those other caliber of quarterbacks. So again, I say to them, if you don't want to play with the Matt Ryans, the Phillip Rivers, the Jacoby Brissetts, or the Carson Wentz, then what you have to do is you have to go out and draft somebody who you believe is going to become an elite quarterback. And the only way you can do that is to rebuild your organization from the ground up. If this season doesn't end well, I would consider getting rid of Frank Reich. He doesn't seem to be the quarterback whisperer we all believed he was going to be. And if you're really going to build a young quarterback up, I'm not sure he's the guy I want coaching my young quarterback because it seems like he doesn't have a leash when it comes to the quarterback position. And I think you have to have patience when it comes to developing a young quarterback. Growing up, I watched the Colts be a routine postseason team. They were elite. They had Peyton Manning. They had Andrew Luck. They had all the answers. They were one of the best well-run organizations. I'm shocked about how this has all played out now post the Andrew Luck retirement, and I hope they get their act together. The last thing I'll say is it's kind of sad that Matt Ryan's career might end with him being blamed as to why the Colts aren't any good. Does that sound right to you? I mean, this guy could possibly be a future Hall of Famer. He deserves better. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday, so please rate, review, and subscribe.